Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Hi, Florence. I see some names I know.
Yeah, hi Rochelle.
Come on in. If you'd like to put in the chat where you're coming in from, I'm coming from New York City. Kelcey.
Kelcey, I'm coming from South Bend, Indiana. Actually, Mishawaka, but I had never heard of that till I moved to South Bend, which is right next door.
There you
Northern
go.
Indiana.
Okay. Um, I am going to get us started. I know people will be joining throughout the entire session, which we're going to probably end up going until 12:15, right?
Wow, Dad.
About
Some reason.
45 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I was just noting that someone was from Baghdad.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
Michigan.
Beverly Hills, Michigan. I actually didn't know there was a Beverly Hills, Michigan, so good to know. All right. Um, so this session, Writers Inspired by the Arts, brought to you by the Bite Size Storytelling Boost. I'm Sheri Handel, and we have Kelcey Ervick with us today. Ervick, excuse me, my letters mixed up there. I just wanted to tell you guys a little bit about Writers Inspired by the Arts as other people are coming in, and then we'll dive into our session. So I started Writers Inspired by the Arts to provide a means by which writers can add another component to their writing toolkit. So I've worked with people who use photographs, drawings, painting, etc., as a way to kind of boost your creativity, expand your creativity. I think anybody at any level, skill level of writing or level of popularity, numbers, etc., everybody could use another component in their toolkit adjacent to the things that you use on your own to help you brainstorm, or illustrate or work off of that particular piece of art if you want to get your writing started. So that's Writers Inspired by the Arts. We've talked with Amy Liu of MFA Law. She was my first guest, and I'm very grateful to Amy for helping us get started. Lisa McGuire, Michelle Dowd, Becca Johnson, and Darian G of Writerish, and Dr. Jane Warmeister. And we talked a little bit about the intersection of art, writing, and public speaking. So that was an interesting session as well. So that's a little bit about what I and my guest speakers are working on with this series. So every 2 weeks here on Substack Live. But today, I'm very grateful to Kelcey for joining us. And I'm just going to provide a little bit of background if there are any people here today who are not familiar with the great work that Kelcey is doing. So Kelcey has 4 books published, including her graphic memoir, The Keeper. It looks backwards to me. Is it backwards to you?
It's not backwards.
Okay, good. All right. So I'm reading that now, along with several other books.
Yeah.
And Kelcey teaches creative writing at Indiana University South Bend. does writing workshops and special events for writers and artists. She's got 2 successful Substacks, The Habit of Art and Letters to Dead Authors and Artists. She's been featured in Substack as part of, Substack Reads and Substack Discover. And she's currently number 3 rising in comics. So, I looked yesterday and I think it was number 4. So
Just keep rising.
there you go. Love that about you. Okay. So, Kelcey, today I want to kind of take people on a little road trip of your journey as a writer and an artist, visual artist, and kind of help people to understand kind of how you got to where you are now. And we're going to close with, or toward the end of our program today, Kelcey's going to walk us through one way that everybody could use drawing as part of their toolkit. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's talk a little bit about your background as a writer and as a full professor. So I'm just curious, like, when did you start writing and why did you get a PhD? For goodness sake.
Yeah. Well, one thing about my PhD that I wanted to make clear is that my PhD is actually in creative writing, which means it's actually a PhD in English literature, but that I got to do a creative dissertation at the end. So the whole way I was taking fiction workshops as if I were like in an MFA program. But then I was also taking all of the literature courses and writing all the papers, and I took the comprehensive exams, over 180 books, but then I was able to do a creative dissertation, which was a novel that has never been published, but led into many other projects. So actually, when I was looking to get my PhD, I was also looking at MFA programs. I wanted a creative writing program. But I think another important question about why I got a PhD is also how did I come to think that was even a possibility for me? Because I grew up, as my graphic memoir that you held up mentions, I grew up as an athlete. I did not really see my trajectory. I always loved reading. I always kind of wanted to be a writer, but I didn't think that was available to me. And so it was actually in my 20s, I was reading, do I have it? The Artist's Way. This is my original copy from the 90s. And
I think we have one of those here too.
Yeah, I mean, reading this was totally transformative because I was an athlete. So I thought that's what you are. But by the time I was done with college, I was no longer an athlete, and I was interested in all arts and writing. I was an English teacher. I mean, I was an English major. I became a high school English teacher. But then I was on this journey to kind of figure out I don't know, more of what I wanted to do. The Artist's Way is a lot about reflecting on what your dreams were when you were a kid, and thinking about what are 5 careers you would do if it were possible. And it just got me thinking about other possibilities for my life. I was also fairly miserable as a high school English teacher, I have to say. I was not very good at it, I don't know, just reining in all those kids.
Yeah.
So
I want to just follow up on one thing you're saying right now.
Yeah.
And if you don't appreciate that, just tell me to be quiet.
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine.
But who got you into the Artist's Way, since it seems to have played such a big role?
That's a great question. I don't know. It was probably me wandering around Joseph Beth booksellers in Cincinnati, just for books that that seemed interesting. Like it probably just, yeah, I don't think anyone.
So self-directed.
I think so. I had read Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg, and that was kind of in that same like genre of like writing empowerment. But anyway, so I just decided like I wanted to get out of my high school teaching job and move into higher ed. And so I was looking at MFA programs, but I ultimately was living in Cincinnati. I had a kid. I was kind of anchored in Cincinnati, so I ended up going to the University of Cincinnati, where I was really lucky. They had a master's program and then also a PhD in creative writing. So that turned out to be really great for me because I got to study like literary history while I was studying like how to be a writer and doing all the workshops and that kind of thing. But it really like gave me a broader sense of the history of like how literature is produced and received and who gets made famous by whom, and it was of course like a boys club, a white boys club for, most of American history.
Yeah.
And so that was really interesting for me to see as, as a woman, as a mom, trying to write stories about like baby showers and kids' birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese, which is what shows up in my first book, which is a collection of short stories that were hugely inspired by my life as a mom of a young kid. And but it was like, but in graduate school, I was like the only mom of a young kid,
Yeah.
There were a few dads of young kids, but their wives or partners were caring for the kids. And, and I was quite responsible for my daughter. I mean, my husband at the time, he helped out, but I mean, it was different being a mom and being, writing these kinds of stories in an academic graduate program. And actually, even The Artist's Way was like, I knew not to tell anybody that I had read it. I had one other friend of mine who was in the program, and he and I like secretly talked about it, like how we both were inspired by The Artist's Way. But we were like, but we can't talk about that in our classes. It wasn't serious literature enough or whatever.
Yeah.
So
you're kind of immersed in the world of literature and creative writing, and you earned your PhD. Did you move from high school to university right away in terms of teaching?
Yeah, I transitioned at the high school. When my daughter was born, I transitioned into doing like a program director job. So I got out of the classroom and did that for a couple of years, and then started the master's and then PhD program. So I was in for 6 years ultimately, which was great. I mean, so yeah, that was what I did.
Yeah.
And then I was starting to teach at the university while I was a graduate student. And then I got a job as a professor when I graduated.
Yeah. And you're a full professor now, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. I was an adjunct for years.
Okay.
So I can appreciate what that means to you.
Yeah, well, that's a tough gig being an adjunct, and I appreciate what that means.
Thank you. Okay, so I want to bring the drawing in now, if it's not too soon. So when did you start drawing? And I understand that you had The Artist's Way as kind of part of your creativity toolkit all along. But your first book of short stories, does that have drawings in it?
No.
Yeah.
No, so, lots of words.
Yeah. A normal book, right?
Yeah.
So what about the drawing? How did that happen in terms of combining that into your toolkit?
Yeah.
And your work?
Yeah. I'm super excited to see that Tom Hart just joined. He was a major person on my journey into making comics. But I didn't know that I wanted to make comics or that I was interested in comics because, I mean, I loved them, the sort of Sunday funny pages as a kid, but I wasn't really into like, the superhero-y comics books. Hi, Tom. But it was like, Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, like reading this, I was like, oh, you can tell like a smart literary story with like drawings, and and it was like serious, and it was like funny, but it was heartbreaking and sad and just so smart. This came out right after had finished my PhD, so I was like, what is this new thing? Myra Coleman's Principles of Uncertainty, like this style I just love. And so you can probably see in The Keeper, I'm very inspired. Like I don't do the tight panels like Bechtel does. I like the kind of open, lush illustration format of Myra Coleman, but they were both, oh yes, that's a page from The Keeper. And then, then like Linda Barry and Tom Hart were the two that really got me into understanding like how to make comics. And Tom was just one of my early teachers. He runs the Sequential Artists Workshop. It's in Gainesville, Florida, but also lots of great online materials. And I just started to get more like into that world. I started making like short form, messy things like that would come out of my journals. Like, I don't know, I would just like paint some things. Where am I? And draw and whatever. And then I would like start making stories with them or make little short form comics. I think this one has a few little like, I don't know, just like a little like 4-panel kind of thing. This is me saying that maybe sometimes forcing yourself to get it done is self-care, and it's me working my way through a checklist of things to do, and how I felt so much better after I did those things.
It figures that you would do something like that because you're such a doer. You're so productive. So,
well, but crazy. I always have a lot more things on the list that I don't always get done. So.
Do you think there's a connection between, short form, micro fiction, nonfiction, and the world of comics?
Yeah, I actually have a post, a Substack post about about getting into visual storytelling, and it was originally published, or part of it was originally published on the Brevity blog, and Brevity is a literary journal for short form nonfiction, creative nonfiction, so no more than 750 words. So I made a connection between comics and these short form little essays, and really like at the heart of both is like juxtaposition and compression. So like short, like get as short as you can, and then like juxtaposing, like in comics, you're juxtaposing an image and words, or two images that kind of sizzle together. And then compression, I mean, each of my books has fewer and fewer words, as I get more and more images, but I can only like say so much with the words, and then I try to have the images do some of the work.
It's so interesting because, here we are on Substack, and I mean, I was like a creative writing minor in college, and then a teaching major in graduate school. But my entire life, and working in corporate, I told you I worked for McKinsey for a while, and other startups in the world of online learning. And in online learning too, it's all about being as concise as you can, and cutting out all the extraneous stuff and all the fat and all of that. But it does seem like for people who are publishing on a platform such as Substack, that there's this kind of movement towards conciseness. And now that I have entered your world a little bit, and I'm learning about more about graphic novels, memoirs, etc., it does seem like succinctness is like really rising to the top. So, which I love,
Yeah.
because it's a great way to write, to edit, to revise, for that. Okay. I'm going to, did you want to mention any of the other books that you have published?
Oh, I would just say that. So I showed you my first book with a lot of words. The next book, this is actually talking about writers inspired by the arts. This is set at Frank Lloyd Wright's Fallingwater House, which is south of Pittsburgh, and it's the one that looks like a waterfall's coming out of it. But you can see, like, already I'm getting like fewer words. There's a lot more white space, these really short sections. I called it a novella in Flash. And then my next one is has like images, collages, also a lot of white space. And then postcards that I wrote to this Czechoslovakian fairy tale writer. So I was starting to get more and more into using images, and then that led to The Keeper, which, as you've shown, is all hand lettered and image. So it's been an interesting trajectory. And then I mentioned Tom Hart. The two things, can I just say briefly, like the two main things I did to train myself on this journey, because I already had my PhD. I had my PhD in creative writing, but to kind of get into the graphic storytelling, I decided to do two things. And one was to edit a book on making graphic literature. So I edited it with Tom Hart, one of my early teachers. And we have like 28 different contributors who write a craft essay about like how they do what they do. And then we have sample work by them, and an exercise that people can do. And so I got to learn from like all these people that I got to reach out and say, hey, would you be part of this book? And then like edit their essays. So I learned so much just from making that book. And then the other thing I do actually is kind of an origin story to my Substack. So my Substack, The Habit of Art, was that came out of the fact that in 2018, I'd been starting to make little comics and doing short form visual storytelling, but I decided I wanted to get serious about drawing. And so in 2018, I decided I was going to draw or paint something every single day for the whole year. And then I did that in 2018. I did it in 2019, continued it into 2020. And then many things changed, not just the thing everyone's thinking that changed in 2020. At the end of that first year, I published an visual essay called The Habit of Art that included lots of the things that I had created that year. And I took that term actually from Flannery O'Connor. She writes about how artists have to have scientists has to have the habit of science, and artists has to have the habit of art. And so for me, like doing it every day for a couple of years just really helped me figure out like what I liked, what I wanted to draw. I experimented with so many different things in that year, and got like the seeds of a lot of future stories. I know we were going to talk a little bit about where do story ideas come from.
Yeah, that's supposed to be the next question, but I might sneak another one in there.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was a big piece of it, was just kind of putting myself into training, which I think goes back to my like sports days. Like, okay, I want to do this new thing. Like, I got to put myself into training and have like daily practice. And
I love that quote by Flannery O'Connor. And I mean, she basically said, you need to draw to see.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And for me, that really resonates because I do that with photographs, right?
Yeah.
And they're not just eye candy. They're really like I'm seeing my stories and capturing ideas. So that really did resonate. But I want to talk about, or ask you to talk about, because I wouldn't know how to answer, fiction versus nonfiction. So now you're all nonfiction, basically, right?
Yeah.
What happened?